Alright, so we're going to do a quick tutorial here in Blender. It's going to be a quick animation of this Qiskit logo. I call this Qiskit blend. That's the name of the file. So before we do that, what we need to do is make sure that under the Edit tab, and when we go to Preferences, you should see that the SVG import tool is selected. Make sure that's, well, actually that's the accept, sorry. Where is SVG? There we go, SVG. Otherwise, you can just type in SVG here in the search box. And if this is checked off, then we are good to go. And then all we have to do is close it, or if you want to save it as a preference, you can go ahead and do that and close it. Now, the next thing we need to do is go to File, Import SVG. And I have an SVG downloaded of the Qiskit logo. I have some other Qiskit logos that I tried playing around with to make the transparency and all, but it's not the greatest, so I'm going to go with this one. And when you import it, this is something you should see. And it might be out of view or it might be zoomed out, so make sure you zoom in. You can also click on the Z and then get closer. So next thing we need to do is just out of good practice, center the origin to the mass or to, well, to the surface or to the volume. So you can click either one and you should be able to move this comfortably. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll over here. And next step we need to do is go to the Object tab. Make sure this is in Object mode and go to this Object tab. And then go to Convert and Mesh. But it says here that Mesh is not able to be selected for some reason. So I'm going to go ahead and try this. I'm going to click Control J. And everything should be grouped together ideally. So let me try this once again. Convert Mesh. Control J. There we go. Okay, that's better. Now that works. So everything should be grouped together and it should be converted into a mesh like I just did. And that's what we want to do. And the next step we need to do is very critical, is go to the edit mode, and we should see that there's a 2D mesh that has been formed out of this SVG shape. But there's a lot of vectors, vertices that have been created. And what you need to do next is select this entire 2D mesh and then click on, let me see here. Before we do that, let's go to this wireframe shading and then just reselect everything so that we don't miss anything by accident. And now what we need to do is do right click and go to Mesh Tools. And you should see this selection here called Limited Dissolve. If we click on that, it will remove all the unnecessary vertices that are on there. This will make it so much easier when we're extruding, and it'll make this shape a lot smoother when we extrude it. And the thing is, if you don't see these mesh tools on here, then you can come up here and go to Edit, Preferences, and then make sure that Mesh Tools is selected. So Mesh Tools. So make sure the Edit Mesh Tools add-on is selected. And if that's not there, make sure it's there. And then you can go ahead and just close this. And then when you go back here and right-click, you should see this option called Mesh Tools. And then go to Limited Dissolve. Optionally, I believe Mesh should be located here. Let me see here. Limited Dissolve. It's not located here. I don't think so. Now we can make sure we have everything selected, again in wireframe mode, and we can kind of tilt, press extrude, and then if I press the letter E key, it will extrude, or I could simply go to the left side here, again in edit mode, make sure that faces are selected. See, faces are selected. Make sure it's in wireframe mode. Select all the faces here and then go to extrude region. That's one thing you can do to extrude the face, and then you end up with a nice 2D shape. 2D shape extrusion into 3D. Or you could just press the letter E key, and then we'll begin to extrude it. So same operation, more or less. And now I can go back to object mode. Okay. Now I should be able to see that this Qiskit object has been turned into a 3D model. See that? Beautiful. I like that. And now what we can do is select a shade of the material. We can select some brighter color, turn it into a piece of metal, make it less rough so it's kind of shiny like a real piece of metal. And we can go to the camera view. I can zoom in a bit. Okay, so the camera in itself is, I set it with the depth of field here. The depth of field here at frame 1 is like 0.4. I'm going to see what I can change here to make it in focus. Here we go, 0.27. 0.27 is the depth of field, so I'm going to go ahead and reselect that. And then everything else up to like frame 180 should be the same. So I'm going to click on 0.27. If you want to change the depth of field, that's fine. You can make it, you can animate the change of the depth of field over time. And then I could choose to rotate this. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Object Properties. And then we can select this as the first keyframe. And then the final keyframe is 180. And we can rotate this 360 degrees and then select it as a wireframe. And we know that since these two are selected in yellow, I mean, if it wasn't selected with yellow, say I only selected one of them, then it's difficult to do interpolation. But you can make interpolation happen by selecting both of these dots, these keyframes here, and then press the right click, and then go to interpolation mode and select linear. You want the interpolation to be like a smooth operation. Now if I press save, I can now begin to render. But the rendering settings I'm using here is Eevee. Oftentimes I use cycles, but for this bloom effect, it's nice to use Eevee for that. From what I understand, there is some settings you could play around with in cycles to get this Eevee, the same sort of bloom or similar. And then here are my bloom settings, and the color of the bloom is set to a hex value of 1F70C1 or RGB value of whatever you see here. There you go. Okay, so I have motion blur activated here under the render tab, the render properties, and then the output properties. I like to have this with like a 2K rendering setting, with the render region and the cropped render activated. And we're doing this at 15 frames a second, so you can put a custom render frame here, frame rate. I'm going to save this. I'm going to go ahead and begin the render. Here we go. It should render fairly quickly. Let's check this out. I'm going to put on repeat. And our render looks beautiful. Look at that. Okay, that's good. So I'm gonna go ahead and close the video. I hope that was somewhat informative for you. All right, take care.